Well, let's now talk about the week that was here in Ottawa. And to do that, we are now joined by our political strategist, Susan Smith, Liberal strategist, co-founder and principal at Blue Sky Strategy Group, Conservative digital strategist Cole Hogan, and George Soule, former NDP Director of Communications, now founder and principal at On Step Strategies. Hello to the three of you.
Hello.
Hello. So listen, I'm going to begin our discussion much as the week began, and that being on defense, because of course Monday opens up with the Carney government saying that they will meet the 2% GDP target that NATO sets for its member states, at least right now, and not only meet that 2%, do so by the end of this year. Moves up the time frame by what, 7 years? $9 billion that will be injected into defense. And to that, I'm kind of wondering from the three of you, how much leeway does the Prime Minister have to do this so quickly, putting that much money? Because on the one hand, we could be looking at other programs suffering because of this. On the other, the government could be spending more money when it promised that it would be more fiscally responsible than the last government. Is it leeway or headwinds that the Prime Minister will face on this, Susan?
I think from a public opinion perspective, at the moment, it's leeway. This is an industrial policy, it's an economic policy, it's a sovereignty policy, it's a security policy, it's a defense policy. And what the Prime Minister has signaled is long overdue bolstering of our defense spending, both from our global commitments, but also on the domestic side of things. Procurement's going to be sped up. We have a new Minister of Procurement. The military is going to get a 20% pay raise. That's really important. And we're going to buy more Canadian things and if required, more European things and fewer American things. And when you invest, what people may not know is if you purchase something from a military perspective from another country, the companies that you purchase from must spend the corresponding amount of dollars into Canada. So it's actually, there's an upside to Canada. When you invest, you actually generate more investment in the country. So I do think the Prime Minister has some leeway. It's not often that Canadians are behind defense spending. But if you look at the Arctic, you look what's going on with Donald Trump south of the border, I think he's got support for that.
Cool.
Sure. So I think, I agree with Susan's point. I think there is, widespread support for this military spending. I think it comes in at $9.3 billion. So we're going to have to see where that money comes from and how the government will pay for it. Yesterday, Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives said that they support additional military spending, that they support the Liberal government getting to the 2% of GDP NATO commitments. But we're going to have to see exactly where that money comes from and how exactly this works. And that's why you see the Conservatives continue to push for a budget sooner than later, so we can see where this money will come from. But I think to this point so far, pretty broad-based consensus on this because the military sorely needs it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Which of course, devil is always in the detail, and at this point we're looking at the promise rather than the implementation. What would you say, leeway or potential headwinds here for the Prime Minister?
Well, I think the answer is yes to both. I mean, strangely, I'll agree with Susan, so we'll start off on a good point. I'll agree with basically...
Buy a lottery ticket. He disagreed with Susan.
I'll agree with basically everything she said, actually, and I think that all of those things are true. I think that right now he's got a lot of leeway. I think he's, the honeymoon is going well. He's, trying to move quick action. I think the headwinds will come when the bill becomes due, and I think, there will be cuts. Where will those cuts come from? What's that going to look like? And if there's not cuts, it's a growing deficit, so how does he deal with that? Once the honeymoon's over and we're paying the bill on this, there's going to be some questions. I think I'll add, though, the other concern is this was a real opportunity, I think, to invest in the North. I think we have to acknowledge that the Arctic is a target of Russia, China, and frankly, America. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's good that we're spending money because we can no longer count on America to come to our defense because they might be the ones that are attacking, frankly. But I think there's a lot that could have been done there, right? There's a lot of infrastructure that could have been built, roads, community centers, broadband, water, all kinds of things that could have been done for communities in the North that could have legitimately counted as military spending, but also improved for the people in the North. And I think, we heard Laurie Idlout this week talk about the Inuit sometimes being used as human flags, staking claim. And I think that while some of that work is going to be done, I think a lot more should have been done. And I think we'll see how this rolls out, but I think a focus on that would have and should be part of what comes next.
I think it will be, George. I think you're right in flagging it, but I do think that that's going to be part of that $9 billion spend. It's clear the Prime Minister is aware of both the opportunity and the challenges that we face in the North. It's key to our defense and economic sovereignty, and it's something we have the U.S. doesn't. And so I agree. I don't think you'll see the Inuit used as flag wavers anymore, or But I think you'll see the kind of investment in the north, and it'll be allocated towards defense spending and dual infrastructure. That's what they were talking about. Can we build a road that helps our defense and sovereignty and security up there, but also is beneficial to communities up there or industry up there?
Well, I will say, having been in Saskatoon for the first ministers' meeting just, a week and a half ago, the territorial premiers are very enthusiastic about the potential, but it's still potential because we don't know what the details are. So potentially it could be something great, and I think you kind of alluded to it. I think part of it, and I don't know if you want to comment on this, is how well the Prime Minister and the government sells it. Less an expenditure and more an investment. I think that kind of parlance will be interesting to see how that emerges. I don't know if anybody wants to say about that.
I think the Prime Minister's been talking about investment since before he became Prime Minister, about investing in the country. And I think at the moment, people see it as an investment, both in those three things that I talked about, our economic security, our economy, security, and our sovereignty.
Yeah, and right now it's hard to find imperfections on a blank canvas. We have a lot of these promises and everyone seems to be broad-based consensus, even on this panel, but we'll see what happens when, the devil is in the details and we get to see those.
Okay, and with that sets up the Conservative leadership.
There we go.
Is that devil or details?
I wasn't going there. However, I do want to raise the fact that, and this goes to a poll that came out from Nick Nanos, a recent poll, where he basically noted that since the election, Pierre Poilievre's numbers have plummeted, and that's his word, not mine. And we know the Conservative leader will have to undergo a review, as laid out by the Constitution. If you lose an election, there will be a review. And I guess the question is whether or not it continues to make sense for the party to keep Pierre Poilievre as its leader, given the fact that A, he did not win the election, B, he did not win his riding, and C, no matter how you look at it, throughout the whole campaign, when Canadians were asked who their preference was to be Prime Minister, it was not Pierre Poilievre. Does it, and I'll begin with you on this one, Cole, does it make sense for the party to hold on to Pierre Poilievre as leader?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things at play here. Obviously, resignation of Trudeau, election of Mark Carney as Liberal leader, the free fall of the NDP, Trump was another big factor here. And in that jumble of situations, there was still Conservative gains. So on the positive side, you have 25 new seats. You have seats in Kitchener, London, Windsor, Hamilton. You won, 3 million extra votes. You have 41% of the vote, the highest share since Mulroney. Those are all the positives. So now there's new people in caucus who probably don't want to jump into a leadership review right away, so we haven't seen it from the caucus side. But just like any other election or any other political party, he will have to face a leadership review at the next convention, whenever that is. I think that he will have the support of members because if you remember back to 2022 when Pierre Poilievre was running for the leadership race, the membership was about 220,000. Now it's 675,000, and that's mostly due to Poilievre's leadership. So I think when I look at that membership, that looks a lot different than it did under Andrew Scheer and O'Toole. They'll look at the progress that he's made, and most of them are Poilievre conservatives. So I think he has the support of the membership, but we'll have to see how it actually plays out and if there's any, organizing dissenting factors. But I would feel pretty doubtful about that outcome.
I think part of the question, though, is to whether or not, yes, he's appealing to the membership, but is he appealing beyond the membership? So what would you say to the question as to whether or not it's worthwhile?
Cole had a big long list of what Pierre Poilievre has said about why he should stick around.
And you bit your tongue. You were very good.
Oh, yeah. I was just waiting to see if he would manage to also include likability, trust, people's whether or not people felt that Poilievre was the guy who could handle the country and handle the economy and position Canada globally. Those were things that people clearly said no to, and those are things that people clearly said no to in his own riding. He didn't even win his own riding, got spanked, 300 votes he lost by, or give or take. So I think that's very much a question. I don't know, and Corey would have to correct me, are the Conservative members from 2020... Cole. Sorry, Cole. Sorry, Cole. Sorry, Cole.
That's okay.
I'll slow down.
It's his cousin.
You would have, are they members for life? Do they still like Mr. Poilievre in 2025 after, they got nowhere again with him? And then very much the question, and you said it right off the top, post-election, when people are seeing more of Carney, including people who didn't vote for Prime Minister Carney, they like him. They trust him. His trust numbers are up. They think he's handling the economy well. They think he's the guy to handle the economy. So I do think Mr. Poilievre does not have a flat road to retaining his leadership. It doesn't mean he won't get up over the mountain and back down again, but he's going to have to change gears on his bike as he goes up that hill, I think.
Well, what would you say, George? Because, interesting, I think a lot of Pierre Poilievre's numbers from his election in 2023 up until the federal election was this, that he was the anti-Trudeau. And without the Trudeau, is there still, does it still make sense to have the Poilievre?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question, and I think the answer probably is no. But on to what Cole said, and I've heard the Conservatives constantly talk about, like, oh, it's because of the collapse of the NDP, oh, these unique situations with Trump are the results, or why we ended up not quite winning the election. Look, I'm all happy to blame Trump for the results of those elections, and I actually agree to some extent. But they take that, they blame Trump for all the negative of what happened to them, but don't actually accept that some of the positive came from that as well, right? Like, NDP collapse doesn't directly mean more Conservative seats. It means that in some places it means, or it doesn't mean fewer Conservative seats. In some places it means that there could be more. Like it depends on what riding you're in. So this idea of everything in this election meant that all the bad things are other people's faults and all the good things are our fault misses reality. And I think the other thing that imagine a Liberal or NDP leader who was living in fully funded public housing, who needs to be escorted by a member of parliament into the House of Commons, or not the House of Commons, like into the West Block to give a press conference. It can't be walking around the building without somebody holding his hand, essentially, and getting away with that, and then spending $1.6 million just to be able to run in one of the safest seats in the country to get his jobs back. And Canadians are going to pay for that. I think the Conservatives would be losing their minds over a Liberal or a New Democrat doing that. And meanwhile, that's what Poilievre's doing right now. And I think at some point, I think that's going to click with some folks, and I think that's going to be a problem for him.
Okay. Listen, I'm going to move on because I do want to also talk about the upcoming G7, because you talked about the popularity of Prime Minister Carney right now, and I wonder if it's going to take a hit because of the guest list that's causing controversy right now in the G7, including the fact that the Prime Minister has invited the Indian Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, to Kananaskis. George, what do you think about the potential pitfall this presents for the Prime Minister?
Well, I think this is something that can be easily ignored by folks who kind of forget the news or aren't really kind of in the middle of this. But, Prime Minister Modi, and it's fine to say, look, we need to do business with India, but at what cost? And like, the economy matters and jobs matter. But when you have a Prime Minister who has been credibly tied to the assassination of a Canadian on Canadian soil, and then now we hear reports that confirm what some of us already knew, but that also credible ties to both the stalking, essentially, and planned to kill the leader of a major federal political party, that being the then leader of a major political party, that being Jagmeet Singh, and the fact that he needed to have close protection, and his family was at risk, and he had to give birth to his child. Well, he didn't give his birth, but his wife gave birth to his child under while security was kind of surrounded because of credible threats from the Indian government, and again ties to Modi directly. And you invite that Prime Minister to our country to negotiate with and shake hands, and as if nothing's wrong. I think most Canadians would recognize that, yes, economy matters, yes, trade matters, and yes, we can overlook some things, but at some point you can't shake the hands of someone who's doing those kinds of things on our soil. And I think that's something that Carney, if he doesn't wrestle with right now, is something that's going to be part of the rocks in his backpack that are slowly being put in that will weigh him down as the honeymoon wears off.
Cole?
Sure, we'll see if Mark Carney gets, domestic heat on foreign issues like this. And we've seen members of Carney's Liberal caucus come out and express displeasure with inviting Modi over to Canada for the G7. So we'll have to see how that plays out long term. If caucus is vocally, going on TV and expressing their opinion, I understand as well, the Liberal, Mark Carney wants to put his new stamp on this new government and, claim things as his own. So now that's taking the form strategically of well, we're going to do business with these other countries, given that we can no longer rely on the United States, even though we're hammering out the final details of a potential deal. So now, Carney and the federal government are looking elsewhere, but how does that balance out with how international issues play out domestically?
Okay, Susan?
I think Mark Carney wants to demonstrate that Canada and he can walk and chew gum at the same time. I think he's known for direct speak, and what better way to directly address the issue with Prime Minister Modi than face to face. I understand that people will be upset, there's no question, and definitely the stories attached to Modi are not great. But, and you have to find a way to deal with that, not but, and you have to find a way to deal with that. So Carney's got the G7 leaders coming to town, or coming to Kananaskis. He's invited the Saudi
Crown Prince as
well. He's invited Modi as well. We've got Donald Trump there. There's all kinds of things that could happen, but you can bet only one thing will not be the story. I think we were talking before, there's not going to be a joint communique at the end of the meeting. They've already agreed to that. So I think his goal is to achieve the kind of progress that he can in the areas that he can. And by slamming doors, you can't fix things, I think is his approach for the time being. And why not go straight on with Modi? And if it doesn't go well, there's a bunch of other things going on too at the same time.
But Trey, just quickly on this, like again, this is another example of Mark Carney running the place like a business, like our country like a business, instead of so it's the bottom line before people and other considerations. And if this is some kind of elaborate plan to get Modi here and we can arrest him, then I'll be happy to come on the show in next week or the week after and be proven wrong. Like, wow, that was brilliant of Carney to track down this guy who's credibly been attached to the murder and planned murder of Canadians on Canadian soil. But I don't think that's what it is. And you don't have to shut down. In fact, we do trade with India. So you can continue to do that trade and just tell the Prime Minister, you can't be here right now because we have a huge sick population that are under threat by your government, period, right? I mean, the same with the Crown Prince. There are too many. It'd be great if we said there's no trade, but we don't. We have trade with them. We continue to do business. That's fine. But the difference between doing business with them and inviting them and rolling out the red carpet is stark. And I think that it is a step far too far. And I think that it is a mistake. And again, it's another example of Mark Carney thinking he's the smartest guy in the room and trying to run this country like a business. And I think that's the kind of thing is going to, again, people are giving him a lot of passes right now, but I think it's going to catch up to him.
Okay. Well, we'll see how it all shapes out in the G7. Without a doubt, we'll speak about it again next week. And too, very quickly with India, of course, the Hogan Commission said that they are one of the largest perpetrators of foreign interference in this country, and there are now individuals facing criminal trial as to being accused of being agents of India involved in the murder of Mr. Nijjar in British Columbia. So things that we're tracking. But for this week, George Soule, Susan Smith, Cole, don't call him Corey Hogan. Sorry. Thank you very much for the time.
Everybody's a liberal, dude.
We'll talk again next week. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much.